you. Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see you. Thanks, Chief Aguilar, for inviting me to come moderate today at another Homeland Security Defense Forum. Luckily today, he said we get to moderate a panel on the frontline through acquisition, enterprise support, and operational needs. You just heard the intros of the panel on here. If you know anything about CBP, you know these three people. So we're going to get to a lot of good information today between Ntina, especially Earl with the acquisitions. Everybody's always asking me about all the acquisitions. And then Jody has a lot of the insight, operational needs, of course, NII and biometrics. So we're going to get into it. I do promise towards the end, I do want to try and save enough time for questions because I always get that all the time. I get in trouble when I don't leave enough time for questions. So I definitely will try and do that. I believe Megan has where the mics will be, or they'll be floating around toward the end, but we'll get to that. So I do want to get started with EAC Cooper. If you can give us kind of a little insight as to, so it's been a little over a year. Took my old job, did a great job, doing much better than I am, I'm sure. But so it's been a little over a year, and it's been a big year. It's been a lot of changes going on, but I know you always had your strategic vision of where you wanted to get going, looking at enterprise services that services all of CBP. So if you can just tell us a little bit about where your strategic vision has gone to this past year and where you're looking to go.
Absolutely. Good morning, all, and thank you for the invitation to be here. And you know, I did have a pretty good teacher before I took this gig. So
Kari Huffman.
Yes, Kari Huffman, exactly. That's exactly what I meant. But again, happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I think where I come from when I think about sort of the strategic vision for enterprise services, it comes down to this. A mission as important as U.S. Customs and Border Protections deserves world-class resources, whether that's personnel, whether that's services, whether that's technology, or whether it's infrastructure. This is not a place where we should be running from behind. And so thinking about ways that we can make investments into ensuring that every one of those things that I just named is at the forefront of what government is able to bring to a mission, again, that is just this critical, that's where I start. And so for us, I'll say this, the One Big Beautiful Bill has been a game changer in our ability to deliver on that strategic vision. Everything from hiring, you know, when I was here last year with Darby LaJoy, we talked a lot about understanding requirements, and we talked about, you know, the things that are coming for CBP from a hiring perspective. You know, in 2028, we know that many of our CBP officers will reach fully fledged retirement capability. And so how do we think about being in front of that? How do we think about growing the number of Border Patrol agents and CBP officers to meet the need? And that starts with, again, world-class technology resources, things like our hiring portal, bringing those resources to bear so that we are talking to the generation of people that we want to be recruiting. I joke all the time, I am not the person you're meant to be recruiting. I'm perfectly happy to go to a website. But the reality is that everything that we think about in the hiring space has to be around a generation that is technology, that are technology nativists. So those are the types of things when we talk about world-class services, starting from that first moment of interaction with someone who might come to CBP. Certainly, once you get here as an agent, as an officer, as a professional staff member, you deserve an infrastructure that supports you. So that's everything from modernizing our fleet. And there's an enormous, enormous investment coming to us from the One Big Beautiful Bill that's going to allow us to buy 10,000 vehicles to modernize our fleet for Border Patrol predominantly, but not exclusively, and upgrading our facilities. I mean, you heard the deputy up here talking about, you know, his time in Tucson. I'll use one of the facilities out in Tucson as an example. There's actually a couple. They're modular facilities that were, you know, stacked together. Some of our facilities are 50 years old. Our agents and officers deserve facilities where they can feel proud to work, where they feel like the investment has been made to value them. Again, there are billions of dollars coming from the One Big Beautiful Bill to be able to upgrade something like 60 facilities across our portfolio. And while, you know, across the board we have something more like 1,200, we get to tackle those facilities that are really challenging for our agents and officers. And finally, advanced technology. And I'm not going to talk too much today about cloud migration because you're going to have a whole panel this afternoon and they will do it justice in a way that I never would. But creating technology, and whether that's supporting NII, whether that's supporting the autonomous towers you just heard the deputy talk about, having an infrastructure that is resilient, and allows us to move quickly and nimbly in response to the operation. Those are the things that we are targeting as a strategic vision. And that's for the delivery of professional services, but ultimately it is for the delivery of what our frontline agents and officers need.
Yeah, those are all huge pieces for it. And speaking of the one big beautiful bill, Earl, I know it's been one of your top priorities, but speaking of what are the top priorities for the Office of Acquisition, especially over the next 12 to 18 months, because that big bill, the OB3 money is going to drop here come January. And, and how's that align with CBP's broader vision we heard Deputy Commissioner Modlin speak about?
So good morning, everyone. So you said it's one of the top priorities. It is the top priority. I'm squarely focused. The Office of Acquisition is squarely focused on the execution of the One Big Beautiful Bill funds. As you know, we received the billions of dollars and across 7 portfolios or categories. And, I'm just kind of walk you through the categories and just give you a sense of all the contract actions that we have to put in place. I think everyone knows the wall. While we've already have done a lot of good work there, we have a lot more work to do. And so, everybody talks about the wall, but like I said, there's 6 other areas or categories that we also have to work hard on. And so the EAC talked about hiring. Well, how do you hire folks? You probably got to do some marketing and advertising. Just a little, right? And hopefully you guys are seeing some of that as you watch your TV or walk around sometimes. I see it here in DC. But we have to also support the hiring process. So those are contracts, right? And so then you hire all these people. You got to, have a place for them to work out of. And so we got to put contracts in place where whether we're leasing or whether we're designing, acquisition, or improving existing facilities to support Border Patrol, OFO, and Air and Marine. And then in addition to that, there's buys like vehicles. We're going to buy a lot of vehicles, whether it's to replace existing vehicles or new vehicles for all those hires that I was just talking about. And then I won't go too detailed. My friend here can talk about, but OFO has a lot of technology, the non-intrusive inspection equipment we're going to be buying, or biometric systems, things like that. And you got border surveillance, which was discussed, the cross-border tunneling systems and ISTs that we're going to have to buy. And then, did I not forget? We got one more thing, aircraft and related technology. So we're going to be really focused on that. And so that's not the only thing, though, we can focus on, quite frankly. There's this thing called the revolutionary FAR overhaul. That is also going to be a focus. So over the next year, I really, really want to leverage all those new capabilities and flexibilities that it allows us. And so I'm working already with the CPO to make sure my folks get the proper training they need so that we are instituted. But when you think about that, there's a lot that comes out of getting that revolutionary FAR overhaul. We got to actually change our procurement writing system. We actually have to change things like our RPA, our bots. And we also have to change our policy internally. So that's the type of things that I'll be doing over the next year or so. And one last thing, I would like to internally look at, how do we improve just our quality of our procurement documentation and our processes. And so, as I discussed earlier, there's RPA and bots. We heavily use it, and I want to continue to use it. But I also want to look at things like how can we use AI possibly to help and look at the theories or the concepts such as Lean, Six Sigma, theory of constraints. So there's a lot of things I plan on doing over the next year or so.
And luckily you get those 2 days at the end of the week to work from home and continue working.
Oh yeah, okay, to work from home. I thought you were going to say off.
So you get 5 days here and then you get 2
days
happen. Working from home. So that's not,
yes.
And I truly appreciate Earl doing this panel because he does work long, crazy hours doing all this. It's been a lot. So I really appreciate it. And I know you're working way overtime, and as you always are, but even more so.
We
now,
all are.
So I appreciate it. I love XD Hardin. So I get so many questions since I've been retired for the past year, people asking about things within CBP. NII and biometrics is always one of the top. It's obviously one of the very huge money-wise, but interesting in how it works and everything that's going on. So, can you talk a little bit, NII being into CBP's broader plan, but also the biometrics and where you see this going especially the next year, the next 2-3 years? It's a lot of money to spend, but also a lot of work to actually get it out there.
Yeah, we as Ms. Cooper was saying, we've been very fortunate in the ability to move forward with a lot of things that we've had plans for, that we've been exploring and looking at for years. With the technology, it's really all about how it's supporting those processes, helping us better identify threats, move a little faster in being able to focus on our mission, on our important law enforcement mission, and again, mitigating a lot of administrative types of things that we do because of the way current infrastructure is set up. So in addition to just like kind of procuring equipment, which is kind of what everybody tends to think about in NII and in biometrics, it's not just about getting this equipment that can capture, but it's setting up an infrastructure that supports the ability to make us better as government. So looking, kind of talking a bit about what Earl was talking about, like taking a look at those processes and going, like, if we had an ideal state that we want to be in with how we can integrate all this information, because all of these, cameras and technologies that we put out there, scanners and everything, it's all about the data that's collected from that. And we have systems that have been in place for a very long time. They were built that way for a reason, to support very important mission sets, and those are things that can't go away. We're actively, dynamically having to mitigate threats on a daily basis, and at the same time we get this influx of money and we're like, well, what are we going to do? We need to build out all these new things. With our current resources, we get a little bit of plus up of resources, but even that takes time. And everything that we want to do and get into place, we have to try to, work that. And again, putting the strain on poor Earl and his team, because, from an operational standpoint, we want it yesterday. But we have to be accountable. I mean, this is a lot of money that has been given to us. It's your taxpayer dollars. We have the, onus on us to make sure that we're spending that responsibly, that we are, being economical with it, getting the best thing that we can to improve our operations and do that, in a way that is very transparent so that people understand what we're doing with this money. A lot of investments, again, are going into some of just the back-end infrastructure upgrades that we need to do in our computer systems and our OIT infrastructure, and how we collect data and transforming that at the same time that we're getting equipment out there that we are going to be using existing infrastructure on. So you can imagine from our OIT partners, you're going to hear from them later, we're putting a lot of demands as a customer, in operations. We put a lot of demands on our partners in ES and on Earl's team and everybody. So, it's something that, again, it's not just about that procurement of equipment, but making sure that that equipment supports an infrastructure that we're able to operate the most efficiently that we can in the operation.
Thanks, Jody. I want to kind of switch a little bit more to some of the challenges that may be going on. I mean, so if you don't already know, Enterprise Services has Office of Training and Development within inside of there. CBP's academies are nationally recognized as the top law enforcement academies on there. But, and you spoke to it a little bit earlier with all those hiring actions. So you have annually over 3,500 normally hiring actions. This is even more so this year, and then multiple training academies. And we worked on this a lot before, trying to build a resilient, adaptable workforce, but now there's even more pressure on, we have a big workforce, you're getting a bigger workforce. How's that going?
I would say that we have put in place some really critical foundational pieces that we are continuing to build on. Again, candidly, with some of the investment funding we're able to use from the One Big Beautiful Bill related to hiring. But one of the things that CBP has really spent time on over the last 3 to 5 years, really heavily in these last maybe 3 years, has been the conversation about what it means to build a resilient workforce. And you've heard me, many people in this room, I talked a lot about workforce care last year, but workforce care starts for us the day that we hire a frontline employee. And certainly that's true of our professional staff as well. But the day that we hire a frontline employee and they join this family, we have to think about how do we bring them through the academy in a way that their body can physically handle, right? And there are fitness requirements that they have to meet, but how do we not just get them through and let them meet that FLETC standard for graduation, but help build up a resilient capability in them to be able to carry that fitness through into a role where that fitness can sometimes mean their safety. So everything from, building nutritionists into our programs at the academies. And as you said, our partnership with FLETC has been extraordinary, particularly this last year. But building things like nutritionists, folks to help them think about their financial wellness. Essentially what those of you who know Chief Huffman would say is everything we can from that first day to help them think about their choices left of bang. How do we reduce those stressors? How do we create a resilient workforce that's ready to handle the demands of an incredibly challenging mission and not take it home in a way that ultimately becomes unproductive for that individual employee? And that starts at the academy, but it doesn't end there. We have programs focused on nearly every aspect of wellness and resiliency, whether that's some of the things I mentioned, nutritionists available, financial counselors available. We also employ, for the first time in one of the few agencies outside of DoD that does, operational psychologists, whose job it is to work with managers to make sure that they can create the most conducive environment possible for their employees. And what that environment looks like differs drastically location to location, based on what they're dealing with, what they're seeing. You've heard us say before that CBP is the most humane organization in federal service, and we have the stats to prove it with our rescues. But the act of rescuing a child from a river takes a toll. How do we support the agent that did that? We think about that now in a way that a decade ago, if you'd told me I would have seen a Border Patrol agent wrapped around a critical incident canine after the death of a colleague, grieving, I would have told you you'd lost it. That is where we are in the way that we support our people now, and we have growth to give. But we've had tremendous partnership across, all branches of government to really bring the resources to bear to be able to keep building up those programs, so that yes, we hope that you come out of the academies with a resilient mindset, well equipped to handle the stresses of the job. But our job is to support our agents and our officers and our professional staff every step of the way for as long as they want to be part of the CBP family, and even after they retire. And that includes their families as well, because wellness can't just be about you. When you came home cranky, I'm sure Kathy just said, it's okay, it was just work. It has to be about the whole family. And our investments are continuing to grow in this area. And we, looking at a room full of industry folks, we are looking for new ways every day that we can support our employees. The traditional ones I've talked about, you've heard me talk about them before. But if there are new things on the horizons, we've talked a little bit about wearables, and those have some long-term research implications that we'll be looking at. But if there's something out there that we've never thought about, this is why we have the business portal. It's why we accept, through an appropriate process, unsolicited proposals. We want to hear what industry has to offer, because if there is a legacy to leave, it is one that cares for our people.
It's still one of all the operational things that I was able to accomplish, and other things, the workforce care, the Directorate, and everything that y'all continue to grow is still one of the things I'm most proud of. Just like my wife Kathy's most proud of the support canines over there on the Border Patrol side.
She is the mother of canines.
Yeah, she is the mother of canines. So it is one of the things to best leave behind that I'm very happy to have been a part of. So switching over to Earl a little bit more away from the workforce, but getting back to like the big beautiful bill, like what are some of those challenges of working like some of those large scale acquisition programs? And if anybody in the world, CBP, other than DoD, CBP does a lot of large scale acquisition programs. How has that been able to guide you in executing when you start figuring out how to execute all those OB3 funds effectively, right? Because it's a lot of money in a very short period of time, with the results expected quickly, as Jody spoke to.
Well, I'll start with one of the challenges is industry engagement, if you will. Industry reaches out a lot and wants to know things as we're developing our acquisition strategy. But we're partners. We really need industry. So it's really a challenge of, we want to work with you, whether it's through our RFI process, meeting with you to understand, solutions, innovation, but we also have to balance that if we get out and say one thing and then we change strategies, it also can create problems because we understand that you're going to start to invest and go down that road to support our needs. So it's a balancing act. And so, I believe in early engagement with industry, right? I think it's so, but it is a challenge. So that's one challenge that, I would say, because sometimes some persistent folks are calling and asking, and I honestly would tell you, I would love to talk with you more, but let us first kind of figure out, what are we going to do before I then give you information that doesn't serve us possibly. The other thing I think is a challenge is, as you know, when you get this amount of money, there is a pressure to really move really fast. Sometimes that leads us to this idea of going sole source. That is a challenge that I really have to push, that if possible, I always want to compete things. So last year, procurement had an 83% competition dollar rate. It's really high. I mean, the goal is only 69%. But it is a challenge because a lot of times folks think, rightfully so, there are times where doing it sole source is easier. But I always really try to say it's probably competitive procurements are better long term because you save money. That's when you get a lot of the innovation. You get a lot of different options that you can do. Just because something's competitive, if somebody has a great idea, you can then go sole source because it may have not covered, kind of like what she was talking about with the unsolicited proposal. There's a lot of ways, but my point is competition rules, but it is a challenge sometimes to do. And another thing is resources. Resources is an interesting one. And for me, a lesson learned was I like to resource with the best folks and not have them distracted. And so that's always tough, right? Because while I am concentrating on the one big beautiful bill, CBP also has a lot of other things going on. And so resourcing is challenging. And then I'll end with this, and it's oversight. So remember, we're trying to do competitive, we're trying to do things fast, limited resources. But I believe you have to have oversight in real time. You do not want to wait until the end. And so, unfortunately, that means that, you have to balance allowing your folks to go and run, but then maybe slowing them down a little bit to think, to ask those questions, to make sure they have the proper guidance, to make sure they're working with legal, to make sure they looked at policy, to talk through things like that. So those are the types of challenges that when I think of OB3, how do you provide enough oversight without slowing the process down?
And I'm so glad you brought up the sole sourcing versus the competitive and all that. I get that question so often, all that. Like, we can just solve the problem. The CBP would just sole source it.
Oh, so
and so I get that all the time. But you understand, and I explain that there's a lot of, we have to do, CBP has to do competitive, a certain amount of it. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's important. So Jody, obviously the challenges of, you kind of spoke to it, between the infrastructure, bringing in new NII into old infrastructure, all the computer. Could you speak some about those operational challenges of what you're doing with the biometrics and NII and how it relates, especially like facilities? I mean, that's a big deal. You can't just go plug and play. So if you can speak to that some.
Yeah, I think our biggest operational challenge we have out there is that is kind of fitting the technology into existing infrastructure that's out there. We will see a lot of great examples of technologies and even things that are done in another country. And I've had that where somebody goes, look what we're able to do. We've got this all interconnected, everything's in this infrastructure. that fits, and they've got full communication and full visibility and everything. But when we're trying to do that, just from an OFO kind of perspective, we're operating at 328 ports of entry, over 600 facilities. That's where we have facilities. In addition to that, we've got remote areas we go out to. We do inspections on vessels. We do inspections in warehouses that don't belong to us. We don't own this property in many cases. It's like free space, so we don't have the ability to build out things that we need to do with that. So anything that we're doing in getting technology out there, it has to be flexible. You heard our deputy speak about it earlier. Like, it's got to be able to fit into that infrastructure. It needs to be something that we can't have, large pieces of technology everywhere. We have to be able to tailor it to every single operational use case that's out there. So it's not just a single thing of going, I want to just biometrically confirm, this person, and be able to do that. And these are cameras and systems that can do that. We have to do that in so many varying environments that impact how that is captured and done and what types of devices we can use. And we have to do it in real time. And that's even harder as you get down there and in a remote area, like even at some of our ports of entry, I can go out there to go see things, and we've got everything networked as much as we can for the operational purposes. And my boss calls me from headquarters and I can't get any connectivity on my phone to answer her. And there's no Wi-Fi and there's no ability to do this. So even with mobile things and the ability to be able to get those flexibilities, those challenges are something that we have to overcome across the board. In addition to that, I think kind of going back to what Earl was saying, again, everything that we're doing, we want to do at a quick pace. We get this infusion of money and we know that there's great technology that's out there, but nothing we can do can go out there if we haven't tested it and proven it. And in the operation that it's going to work. There's a lot of great technology that we know is out there. We get it in the operation, it completely fails, whether that's for the operators not accepting it as part of the process of what they do in a law enforcement mission, or whether it is all of these infrastructure issues. We have to be able to get ahead of that. We work a lot in the innovation realm with our partners in S&T, with our invent teams to try to test things out as far in advance as we can. As soon as we hear about a new technology, we want to try to field it and go, is this something that's actually going to work? When we get this big infusion of money and we see like, oh, AI can do this, AI can do this, the first question I get asked if I go to make an investment in this is, what's the results going to be? And if I can't quantify, answer, and prove that out pretty darn quick, I'm going to lose all the confidence of anybody that's given me money to do that in the future. So it's important that we maintain, again, that accountability, that proven technologies, and we have to show operational impacts when we're looking at this stuff.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing up AI. It kind of sets up well for, as anybody that knows Ntina Cooper, she's very knowledgeable on so many different things. Enterprise Services also has the Office of Information and Technology, and Ntina also served as our first Chief AI Officer.
So let's not
and
skyrate that.
her.
We have Josh Powell now. You're doing much better.
Yes, but so if you could just talk a little bit about CBP's IT strategy. Emphasize cloud adoption. Huge as that was coming out, and thankfully, getting money for that. The zero trust, cybersecurity, and responsible AI, as Jody brought up. Not only can we implement it, but does it work, and how we use it responsibly in there. And what does that translate into for frontline operations? All the that IT strategy.
Absolutely. So I would say yes, everything you just mentioned, right? Zero trust, cybersecurity, responsible AI, cloud adoption, while continuing to improve our infrastructure. I think that's the piece. We talk about the buzzwords, and I will absolutely talk about what those translate to from an operational efficiencies perspective. But to the point that XD Hardin just made, if there is no communication available at a port of entry, if there is Wi-Fi not available at a far-flung Border Patrol station, we still have an obligation to make sure that that infrastructure is up to scratch and meets the requirements that our operators have day to day, while we are creating opportunities to embed the things that we're talking about here. And ultimately that translates to a handful of things that are always sort of, eyes on the prize. That's enhanced situational awareness, that's improved agent and officer safety. In the trade and travel context, it's reduced wait times. And then ultimately also allowing for collaboration across agencies. Because CBP is very good at many things, but we don't own everything. And there are agencies out there that are better at things than we are. And so making sure that we have flexible systems that allow us to be collaborative with those agencies where it makes sense is also a part of that strategy. places where I think that for the industry folks in the room, where you think about where you'll see these things come to fruition or where they'll manifest. Certainly that's in the context of the automated commercial environment and the modernization of that platform. You mentioned in a totally different context, but still very relevant, you mentioned that we have these systems out there that they were built at a time for a reason in a way that made sense. And those systems have to continue to operate. But ACE is a great example of a place where we are making investments to make the modifications we need to keep that system nimble and up and running while we look across the horizon to a new ACE that will eventually be cloud-based, be nimble, right? We'll have the flexibilities that right now our folks stay up real late making sure happens every time we deploy something new because the system was just not built with that kind of flexibility. We talked about cloud adoption. What I will say about cloud adoption, and again, not getting in front of the panel this afternoon because they will really, blow your mind with cloud in a way that I certainly couldn't. What I will tell you about cloud adoption is fundamentally, it is about flexibility and uptime. For all of those things that we have already transitioned to the cloud, we are seeing enormous increases in availability and uptime. And it also obviously allows us to be flexible, to make quick changes. The operational tempo is dynamic. It is quick, and what we need to do on a Tuesday might look very different than what we need to do on a Friday in the same week. And having systems that have that built-in flexibility because of the way that they are architected and infrastructured allows us to be responsive to what the operators need. And in the end, that's the ballgame.
Thank you for that. Earl, we spoke a little bit about the sole sourcing and then being competitive, but I want to kind of switch into, what role do the innovative vendors especially, play in CBP's acquisition strategy under OB3, right? So, given the scale and the urgency of all these things having to be done, what do those innovative vendors, what's their role?
So I look at it this way. We value industry engagement. And so we do a lot of industry engagement activities so we can hear from innovative companies. So last year alone, we did 681 individual meetings with vendors to meet with them to get their ideas of innovative ways we could do things, whether, and also, quite frankly, learn about their capabilities and requirements. But in addition, another way for innovative companies to be heard is we do a lot of RFIs. So last year we did 106 RFIs where we're requesting information to understand what's out there. So that's a great opportunity. We do draft RFPs. So those are solicitations that's a little bit further down than just a general RFI, but that is another opportunity, and that's part of that 106. And then last year we did 4 large industry days. OFO did one, Border Patrol did one, OS did one, and so a lot of opportunities for companies to provide their innovative strategies. And so earlier, EAC Cooper brought up the CBP Business Connection Portal. I think that is something that you should utilize. And as part of that, you can upload information, your capabilities. You also can pick the different offices you want to meet with. But there's also trainings that we provide for those innovative companies on how to do business with CBP. So on the first and third Tuesday of every month, we have a training on how to do business with CBP. You can register through the CBP Business Connection Portal. So just look at it, look for it in your search engine. And then I would say in general, whether you're innovative or not, that I would say make sure if you really want a great opportunity to do business with CBP, is get on strategic sourcing vehicles. So the department has them, DHS, CBP doesn't do them, but GSA does them. And then you have the government-wide acquisition contracts. And the reason I say that is 93% of our spend goes through spend under management, as OMB categorizes it. And that means we use strategic sourcing vehicles heavily That's 93% of all of our obligations go through that. So just another way for innovative, because if you have innovation, I mean, there's ways for us to get with you using non-FAR, the CSOP process, OTAs, SIBR, but those are the ways that you can as well. But I try to funnel you or push you to some of the more strategic sourcing vehicles because we use them all the time.
And I'm glad you brought those up this past year. Whenever I've been working with different industry, excuse me, a lot of those, they weren't on any of that. And then they have something great to be able to provide, but you can't. If CBP can't get to you, then it doesn't do any good. You got to do that homework up front to make sure that they have the ability to get to your great product or whatever you're doing. So great, thanks for bringing that up. So I want to kind of switch back to AI, especially with the NII. Like, what role does automation and AI play in everything that you're doing, especially in reducing the workload on the officers? I think the deputy commissioner spoke a little bit about, what that would mean for us, but if you can go a little bit deeper on that one.
Yeah, I think specific to NII, I think originally when we were looking at it, there was a lot of concepts around image adjudication. And what we're finding is that with image adjudication, if you are looking for a specific thing that tends to look specifically like it does all the time, it's been proven out there that AI is very good at locating that within an image. We're talking about, again, going back to like our specific mission set across CBP, it's not about just looking for a single thing. That's part of the challenge that we have, is that NII is a tool in what we do for our overall mission. We are supposed to be screening every person, every bit of cargo, every conveyance that comes through at ports of entry. When we're looking to do that, it's not for a specific thing. We're looking for potential smuggling of narcotics, terrorists, criminals, immigration violations, trade violations, all of this gamut of things that we have to have conversations with people. We have to inspect, cargo. We're looking at different aspects of information that we receive in advance, things that we don't know. And really where AI has been very helpful is where we know specific processes. And again, those administrative tasks. If it's something that we have a finite, data set on, it's going to be pretty much the same every time. We know that this is a process that goes a certain way and it doesn't go off of that. And it's not going into sort of that law enforcement realm where, it's hard to sort of describe what it is that you would have AI trained to do that. There's a lot of science behind what people want to look at with AI and what you can replicate in what humans are able to do. But with law enforcement, it's a little bit of everything big picture. So, we've yet to come across the magic AI that's going to fix everything that we do. There is no single AI that's going to solve, massive problems. We've seen great successes with AI that does face matching. That's helped us monumentally, from me having to study a picture on a passport, study the person in front of me, go to a computer, pull up a bunch of information, but again, the success of that wasn't just in that facial matching. It was re-engineering this whole process of how we did this inspection process. So again, for AI, there's definite use cases out there that we see that are going to be very successful. Anything that we're doing to cull through the data is really, I think, where the largest bang for the buck is. But we're exploring all these different avenues, and it's all, again, by discrete processes out there that that we're doing in the entirety of everything that we do on a daily basis.
Thank you, Jody. And because I said I was going to leave time for Q&A. I still had some more stuff for you all, but I do want to get, because these are the people you want to ask the questions to. I know you don't always get access to them, so I do want to open up for the questions before we get to those. And of course, Phil's hand's always up first. That's the first one I saw with the light, so go ahead, Phil.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Yeah. I really appreciate you speaking this morning. And as I was thinking about each way that you guys are having to scale with significant increase in funding and furthering the mission, something I was particularly curious about was how, when you scale, there's obviously efficiencies to find. Where do you trade off between actually just executing on that new scale and finding the time to do things more efficiently in terms of process, policy, tools, dealing with the FAR overhaul, bringing in new innovation? What's that trade-off like in your day-to-day job, where you're having to decide, where do I focus on finding efficiency and where do I focus on just executing the massive amount of work you have to do?
I would say it's gotten very tactical and something that I'm comfortable with. We're used to operating in a tactical role in the field, but things, my area is in planning, and for a lot of what we're doing out there, there is a lot of planning that you want to go in there. We're taking it and we're chunking it out. We're working very closely with Earl's team to sit there and go, you know what, this is the laundry list of things we got to tackle. I've got to prove these things out. These things have been proven. We're going to start with these things, and we're, racking and stacking. I'm going to, execute purchasing this many pieces of equipment, leveraging this contract. We're going to work on a longer term strategy for getting these things done. We're testing this thing, actively to get it rolling by this date. It's a very dynamic kind of plan that's going on there. I would say I've never been in more meetings since OB3 funding came through for us than I have in my entire government career on a single topic, but that's what it takes. So we're sitting there handling it very tactically to break down all the various aspects of things we have to do, because we have to start on things immediately. We have to have, medium term, this is what we're going to accomplish. We're going to get things on contract by this date. We're going to be executing by this date, and looking to, kind of layer all of that. So it's a challenge. Like I said, for me, I like that. It's operational pace. I'm sure it's making Earl's team probably a little stressed out there, because it is, it's that challenge again that you mentioned earlier of we have that accountability and these things we got to do, and I've got to make sure his team is comfortable that we're not going off the rails with some request with it as well. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about how we've been driving you crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I even made the comment to Ryan earlier. Back in the day, I would say I'm day to day. Now I'm hour to hour. So that's how I handle it. I mean, just to give you a little bit of context, in FY fiscal year 2024, we did $6 billion in obligations. Last year, we did $11.3 billion. And then just to give it more context, action-wise, we went from 6,787 actions to 7,135 actions. So we built a culture of how to do this. And so, quite frankly, I'm like, I love being strategic, but now I'm really tactical. And to a certain degree, I can roll with it because I've already had to do it so many other times. So that would be my answer. That it doesn't. It's just our culture. It's what we do.
That's right. I think, Jody, you talked about it being very tactile, and for some of these programs, it is, right? We're up to our elbows in day to day how many people are in what class of the academy. But ultimately, there is a strategy that rolls up to, and it's all about having multiple levers. Right? I'll use the fleet program as the example, and I hope there are folks in the room who responded to our RFI that closed on the 12th. We have the traditional ways we've always procured fleet. We have partners at GSA that have abilities to procure fleet. What else is out there in the world? And none of these things are mutually exclusive. It's about having multiple levers to be able to say, I need to move out quickly on this thing, and I know there's a good mechanism for me to be able to execute that. And then while I'm doing that, where can I look at other strategic efficiencies that can be brought into this same program, so that we are ultimately, it's about delivering not only what, but when the operator needs it, and with an accountability for the expenditure of those taxpayer dollars. And having multiple levers to do that with, I think, is key for every program, particularly under the One Big Beautiful Bill.
And I think Jody's description of what it's like, and that if a day in the life of CBP and you're at headquarters on, that's every hour of the day that you're constantly adjusting. Tactical is a great word to do because there's so much going on. So if you ever wonder why they don't answer your email or answer your text or answer your, that's why, because they're in the next tactical saving whatever's going on right at that moment. And unfortunately, I didn't leave much time for questions. It's a great question, Phil. I mean, we got to go through all that. We didn't even get through all our questions because they're so in depth of everything that you all are going on. I appreciate everything you're doing. I know Megan's going to come give me the hook here in a second if I don't wrap it up. But I want to thank each of you all again. It's great seeing you. It's great being back. Again, I miss the purpose-driven thing, what CBP does. I miss the people. Not so much being in government service, but I miss all that. But I miss all you all 100%. It's great. So thank you all very much for participating on the panel, and we'll end it right there. Thank you very much.